Right, let's take a look at the new Tomb Raider reboot and see how this one turned out. I started with cautious optimism at the prospect of a new Tomb Raider film, and that cautious optimism quite quickly turned to genuine excitement. First, to get my association with the series out of the way, I've seen the first film and I enjoy it, but it's not a good movie. I just enjoy it. It's a fun time for sure, but this movie really isn't trying to be anything like that, and that could go either way. But with regards to the games, there's 11 games, and I'm partway through the 6th one as I'm currently playing through them, but I've also played the 10th one, which is the reboot series telling our Lara Croft's origin stories, and that is the one most relevant to this movie. Those who've played that game will know from the outset that that's exactly what this movie is sort of going for. The plots are different, but there's a lot of stuff that's very similar. You don't need to know anything about the game to get things from this movie though, because it really does a good job of standing as its own standalone thing. As I say, this movie, like the game, is an origin story, so we're seeing Lara before she's the Lara Croft many of us have come to know and sometimes love. She's not an archaeologist yet, and we don't see her initially with tons of money like we're used to. I don't think we've actually seen her depicted in this way without money. At the beginning of the film, she's working as a bike courier in London, refusing to accept that her father, who's been missing for 7 years chasing after an artifact, has passed away. So she refuses to take the inheritance, but when new information comes to light, she finds out new information about where her dad's gone and why, and sets out on a journey to find him. That's the basic setup for this movie, and I have to stress, it is a lot more down to earth. This is still not a grounded movie by any means, but in comparison to those two movies that came before, it's far and away just much more grounded. Now, I'm not knocking on those movies for being what they are. They exist as separate entities, and I'm cool with their existence. Like, I enjoy them. This one's just taken it down a few notches, and we've now got a more realistically proportioned Lara Croft in the form of Alicia Vikander, who absolutely blows away the competition. The number one thing I can say about the film is Alicia Vikander's performance is basically spot on for what they were going for here. Not only does she really sort of look the part for the current iteration of Lara in the game series, but she's an Oscar-winning actress. What could go wrong? I'm glad that she's pretty much bringing her A game to what many would consider lesser material. She really does elevate the whole thing. At no point in the film did I feel like Lara Croft was being overtly sexualized. I mean, she's a good-looking lady, and you don't need leery camera angles to convince us that. We can see it from a wide. It also helps that she looks the part. She went through a training regimen and she has muscle. She looks like she's someone that, exercises as opposed to someone that just, is doing this as an acting job. Because this version of Lara Croft doesn't have all the talents that later versions will come to or have been depicted in the past, she gets into a lot of trouble and danger throughout the film, and she plays it pretty much perfectly. This exact right amount of vulnerability mixed with strength. It's kind of odd to say, but she does go through a lot in this film and she does scream a lot. But these aren't screams of... This isn't like a damsel in distress. This isn't Mary Jane Watson in Spider-Man. These are the screams of a woman fighting back and actually actively trying to escape a situation, and they aren't annoying. They feel real. I don't know what a real female scream is, but they felt real. These sound like the screams of a woman in peril, but she's not just in peril, she's trying to get out of it. She's actually exerting effort, and she's not just sitting there and letting it happen. Anyway, I've made my point. The central character in this film is brilliant, and she pretty much carries it through the weaker moments, of which there are a few. The first act of the film I definitely enjoyed. It served as a good introduction, although a lot of the stuff that happens there does get completely left all of the movie and isn't revisited. Which is fine because it's not especially important and it never seemed that way, but she has some friends there and her job, but it's all left. I suppose it makes sense, but it did feel a bit tangential. But there's a nice chase sequence here that was actually genuinely exciting and well shot, which bodes well for the rest of the film. It gets you into what you're about to see. When Lara gets to the island she's looking for, the film does take a little bit of a dip, but nothing significant as far as I'm concerned. I mean, Acts 2 and 3 of this film is really where you start to see flaws coming up, but again, it's all held together despite the fact that Walton Goggins as the villain is poor. I mean, we've seen from stuff like Hateful Eight that Walton Goggins has the capability to be quite a menacing presence, but here he's really just phoning it in. I'm sure he is trying, but you could fool me. He doesn't seem to be trying that hard. He's doing the generic I'm a villain stuff, and he tries to make us care more about his plight and provide a three-dimensional character by saying he's got kids and a wife. Who cares? He does the job and that's about it. But the relationship here depicted between Lara and her father is also somewhat not wholly convincing. We see through flashbacks and video footage exchanges between a child Lara and her father, and they try and introduce this oh, we've been a family for real. We really were a family. So we've got all these quirks that we do together. Like he calls her Sprout and they do this thing where they kiss their fingers and go like that, which I find that weird as it is because it just reminds me of Gone Girl, and that's not what they really wanted to convey here. At least I hope not. But that's the way it is, and it feels a little bit cutesy and forced. It doesn't feel quite real, and maybe that's because Alicia Vikander wasn't acting in these sequences because, God, I love her. But despite some weak characters and overall a fairly unoriginal plot, it was engaging because of, again, the central performance, and also the action sequences were all pretty enjoyable, despite occasionally some ropey CGI, but I'm quite forgiving with that specific criticism. Apparently Alicia did a lot of her own stunts, and that's what made the ropey CGI kind of, it was just some odd green screen, but you could see that she was genuinely reacting to it. Again, I'm a little bit lenient on bad CGI. It doesn't annoy me as much as it does some people, but be warned. Overall though, the effects are pretty much what you would expect. It's just a few shots. Something I enjoyed and I've not really seen done before is segments of this film or action sequences feel like they're part of a game, but in a good way. They actually have gotten quite a lot of the spirit of not just the new games, but the old ones too. This puzzle solving, platforming, shooting, stuff that to a non-game player, doesn't sound great, but it works quite well in this movie, and it just feels like a normal movie. This is especially evident when puzzles are being solved, which is just a big aspect of the games. I enjoyed that, and it's fit right into this movie, and it kind of shows how you can incorporate aspects of games into films. There's a lot of stuff in this movie which is pretty much ripped straight out of the game, but that's not really an issue. I mean, there's a plane sequence which is in the game. She takes on certain injuries, which are like exactly what happens in the game, but it doesn't really detract. These aren't story beats, they're just elements. And I wouldn't even call it fan service. There's one moment of fan service in the film, but it's right at the end, and I thought it was pretty nice. The thing is, even though there were definitely issues in the second and third acts of the film, and it did very nearly get a little bit too outlandish for my personal taste. The film's 2 hours long and it blew by, and I'm a person that when a film is 2 hours long, like I'm very cynical. Most movies don't need to be that long. And this movie actually blew by, which is saying something. I really am quite sensitive to the length of film, and I do think that does speak some volumes as to how entertaining this film is, and that's the number one way to push this film. It's not an incredible plot. There's not incredible characters. Even Lara herself, despite being excellently portrayed, has some issues with regards to portraying character development and such. An effectively action-packed pace just means the film just happens and you have fun, and I wouldn't even mind seeing it again. And for me, that's a big surprise. In many ways, it does improve on the games because we do see Lara grow as a survivor, not so much as a character, in a way that the games kind of messed up. Something that is often referred to as ludonarrative dissonance. Ludonarrative dissonance is a term thrown around a lot in games, and it's basically when the things you're doing in the game don't line up to what the story or narrative should be or what you've been told. So in the game and in this film, we are witnessing Lara have her first kills and start to become the survivor and fight back against people and effectively killing them, yeah. In order to make a satisfying game, you have to balance, I want her to appear vulnerable and not adept at using weaponry, and making a satisfying game. So as soon as you've killed the first person, she cries for a little bit and then she picks up a submachine gun and starts mowing down everyone without any remorse. In the film, you can avoid that, and I think in many ways that makes the narrative in this slightly better than in the game, although there's elements to be said for both. There's just no two ways about it. I had a good time watching the film, and I would watch it again, which is more than I can say for most movies, although I'm not actively compelled to. So I'm going to give Tomb Raider a 7 out of 10. Even speaking as someone who did get enjoyment out of Warcraft and actually liked that movie, this is undeniably the best video game movie. Faint praise, I know, but it's good, and that is what it is. Oh, nighttime. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll be back next week with some new releases. See ya.